got a great sound tone to play, you know.
Hello?
Have you ever snogged a lady?
We had a technical problem.
Oh, we're on? Yeah, we're on there.
Can I swear? Shit!
Welcome to Crunch and Roll, a podcast about the side of the radio industry that most people never hear about, featuring some of its most interesting characters. My name is John Fox, known to some as Foxy. If you're thinking, hang on, what are you doing this podcast for, and why are you the host? Well, let me tell you, did a bit of hospital radio, presented commercial radio breakfast shows in some of England's biggest cities, did a little bit of work for the BBC, and I think the biggest achievement of my life was my camping badge for St John's Cubs back up in Hull. Anyway, Google says that the quantum stabilised atom mirror is the smoothest thing in the world, but after listening to this episode, you'll realise this is completely wrong. The smoothest thing in the world is actually Simon Ross's voice. Va-va-voom. Rossi is the breakfast presenter on Greatest Hits Radio, one of the biggest shows on UK radio right now, but there's quite a CV going on before he landed this plum gig. And the stories. We hear about the shenanigans backstage at Capital's Party in the Park involving Suggs and some missing booze, his now infamous moments as stadium announcer at Everton, and, randomly, how he cooked for royalty. Now, before we start, another reminder that if you enjoy this podcast and you are a regular or new listener, we'd be eternally grateful if you could support us on Ko-fi. Just go to ko-fi.com/crunchandroll. And thanks to everybody who has supported us recently, including Judy Tate, Jack Richardson, John Foster, thank you so much, and the funster himself, former guest, Paul Carrington, legend. Okay, with no strong language at all, let's crunch and roll. Oh yeah. Rossi, how are you?
I'm very good, Foxy. Very, very good indeed. And good to see you via Zoom.
Hey, why have you not aged at all?
I'll take that as a compliment. I was 57 just over a week ago. So
no.
Yeah, 60 is looming, Foxy. 60 is looming.
Wow, blimey, you look amazing, Rossi. You still look cool.
Oh, thank you for that. You say the kindest things. Things. It's been a long while, hasn't it, since we modulated?
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting. I was thinking about recording your episode today, and throughout the episodes that we've done on Crunch and Roll, there are some people which I've never met before, which, you know, are interesting in their own way. And then there are people like yourself that I was lucky enough to meet whilst I was in the industry. And I feel it's only right that we talk about the reason we met. And the reason we met was because of a guy called Mike Borden.
Indeed. Good old Mike, yes.
Mike Borden, who, he'll probably hate me for saying this, but Mike Borden was my greatest influence in radio. He was the reason I fought for breakfast shows on Viking and on BRMB. He was, in my opinion, he was just incredible. And I know that you were very close friends with Mike. Still are, I'm guessing, close friends with Mike.
Yeah, now, I've not seen Mike in quite a few years, and I'm not quite sure where he's living. He manages bands and stuff like that. But Mike was managing director, I think. He had a really high position, but he really got jocks. He got the sales side of it. He got the commercial side of it, but he also got jocks and presenters and their ways, and he knew how to nurture them, and he knew how to maneuver them in the right way, so to speak. An amazing lad. I'll tell you, he was looking after some bands, and he used to go to Glasgow every weekend when I was working at Radio N. I can remember him coming in one Monday morning. Said, I went to a showcase the other night, some young fellow, just a kid, and I'm going to manage him. I'm going to take him under my wings. And I said, what's his name? He says, well, he's from Paisley, but he doesn't really have a Scottish name. He's called Paolo Nutini. And that was the beginning of Paolo Nutini's illustrious career.
Do you know, I've got a very similar story to that. So I used to go with Mike some weekends to Paisley because he had a house up there.
Yeah.
And I think it was Hogmanay one year where, you know, the Scottish, they enjoy celebrating Hogmanay. And I was having a fag when I smoked cigarettes with Paolo outside. And Paolo was about 8 years old. It was ridiculous. 16. And he said something on the lines of, Foxy, what do you think to my music? Because Mike used to play it as we were travelling up to Paisley.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's all right. Little did I know that he'd go on to be a multi-million platinum-selling artist, of course. Obviously, it just goes to show what little I knew about music.
He's an incredible voice, incredible style. I do love his swagger. He's got a great swagger when he performs on stage. And I've seen him a couple of times. Very fortunate to have seen Paolo Nutini a few times now. I think he might be in his 30s now.
It's just shocking, isn't it? Do you know, it's interesting, Ross, you talk about swagger, because I always remember Mike Borden, and we'll get over Mike in a bit because he'll hate this. But I always remember Mike sitting me down and saying, listen, mate, I'm going to introduce you to Rossi, right? And I want you to meet him because he is the best at building relationships. And he always said that whatever market you were in, within about a month, you would know everybody from nightclub owners to doormen to restaurateurs to just about everybody. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, do you know, I would always get myself out and about. So, when I moved to Preston, I got out and about. London was a bigger pond, a much bigger pond, but I got to know quite a few people. Leeds, I was all over it. And then when I moved to Liverpool, incidentally, it's going to be 19 years in April since I made the move from Leeds to Liverpool. I got to know quite a few people. But at that time, I was partying quite hard and I was going out quite a bit. These days, I get a nosebleed if I'm still up after 10 o'clock, even on a weekend. It's like totally different. But yeah, still network, and I've still got loads of friends that I met on that circuit nearly 20 years ago. And, we remain friends to this day. But it was always important to get your face out there and to meet people and to get into these bars and clubs and the various venues. And I always made a point of doing that.
All right, Rossi, let's go right back to the start. So you're from Northern Ireland.
I am from Northern Ireland. I'm from a place called Armagh, from the city of Armagh. And I grew up there, born in 1967. Believe it or not, I've never done Irish radio. Have you not? No, I've never worked in the Irish market whatsoever. Because I don't know if you know this, Foxy, but I'm a chef by trade. So,
yeah.
So I moved to London in '86 to better my career as a chef. Obviously, there's got to be a lot more restaurants and more varieties of food sources, et cetera, et cetera. And that's when I started. I was DJing in discos, mobile discos in Ireland before I moved to London. But then the more I worked in the kitchen, the more I listened to radio in the morning when I was doing my prep. And I thought, I'd love to do this. I'd love to do it. And then, I don't know about you, but I did hospital radio.
Yeah.
And I got involved in hospital radio. But I tell you what, you learn how to put a demo tape together. And you're chopping demos and you're getting your best links and what you think is your best links and sending them off left, right, and center. I probably would have been, I don't know, seen as a stalker to the likes of Richard Park back in the day. I was just demoing all the time. But I got stacks of rejections, and I mean stacks. And it got to the stage where I thought, this isn't for me. And I made one demo tape back in, I think it was the beginning of 1991, January 91. And a friend of mine listened to it. And a friend of mine said, I'm telling you now, send this one. This is the one that'll get you a gig. And it got me a couple of gigs, actually. It got me Radio Top Shop, HMV. It got me an interview at Cool FM in Northern Ireland, but nothing came of that. And it also got me a very, very nice letter back from Jeff Graham, God rest his soul, from Radio Luxembourg, the great 208. Sadly, I don't have it on my CV, but I dearly have loved to have worked at Radio Luxembourg. Just
before we move on to the radio side of things, I'm intrigued by the chefing side of your life. I mean, any similarities to chefing as to being a radio presenter, or any stories that you can share with us?
Well, it's an art. Both of them, both presenting and cooking is an art, and it's. Catering was very kind to me, and I got to travel an awful lot with it. And I've cooked for some amazing people. I cooked for the late Princess Diana.
No!
Yeah, I cooked for Diana and the two boys. I had to go on a section on my own. It was only me who was allowed to cook at the Royal Albert Hall. I also cooked in 1991, before I got into radio full time. It was the first time there was sumo wrestling outside of Japan, and it was at the Royal Albert Hall. So I had to cook for the sumo wrestlers. Oh my giddy aunt. The tucker that they could put away was unbelievable. And here's a story. There was a big long, dark corridor from the main kitchen down to where these guys used to dine every day. And I can remember walking on my own down this long, dark hallway corridor in the bowels of the Royal Albert Hall. And 6 of these sumo wrestlers were coming walking my way. All I could see was these giant silhouettes. And I'm telling you now, I'm thinking one of those could crush me to like smithereens. But here's 6 of them coming my way. I did say, I'm cooking your dinner, but they hadn't a clue what I was talking about and just carried on walking.
They're probably hoping you were their dinner. I mean, yeah. What did you cook for the princess? I'm dying to know.
It was all kind of finger food, little canapes, etc., etc. And the boys, I made some fresh lemon sole goujons, if I recall properly. But it was just little platters. But no one was allowed near me, and I had to just be left alone, and off it was sent.
Oh yeah. Let's just focus on Topshop for a bit, because lots of greats went through Topshop, didn't they?
Yeah, there were quite a few. Obviously, Paul McKenna, when Gary King started out there, Clive Warren, Danny Petroni, who still does Weekends and Smooth, a fabulous broadcaster and presenter. Steve Collins was my boss. He was ex-Early Breakfast on Capital. He was the last guy, by the way, to do a link on both Capital FM and Capital Gold. But because he handed over that morning to Chris Tarrant on FM and Tony Blackburn on Capital Gold. So he was the last person to do that. Well, it was a split link, actually. So it was probably on cartridge or something like that.
So, I mean, obviously Moyles, of course, went through Topshop as well. I mean, that was a great starting ground for you, wasn't it?
It certainly was. I got my first gig, and it was a Saturday afternoon. And because it wasn't on the books, this would never happen now. After I'd done the gig, I was handed a little white envelope with, I think it was 50 quid or 70 quid in there. And you know something? It was just like, this is my first ever professional pay. The feeling was similar to that when the examiner turns around and says, I'm pleased to tell you you've passed your driver test. It really felt that good. It really did.
Yeah.
I'm not. And then, of course, I went straight up the stairs into Top Man and bought myself a load of clobber with the cash that they'd just given me. So that was that. And then I was doing stuff at HMV. And it was the only one that could do both. There was certain types that did Radio Topshop, or Fashion Network as it was rebranded when I was there. And there was the Muso types that did HMV. And I was lucky enough that I could sort of do both. But at one stage, I was doing 40 hours a week on air. Seriously. So this was I'd get up on a Monday morning, I'd go to work, I would do Radio HMV from 9 to 12. Then I would do Topshop 1 till 4. Then I would run down the back streets of Oxford Street while the presenter that was finishing at HMV would play my power play at the top of the hour. And then I would get in and back announce it. And I would do 4 to 7. I would do that Monday to Friday, right? Then I'd jump a train to Hampshire and I would stay either with friends or overnight in the radio station. And I would do the breakfast show on Ocean, get a train back to London, do the afternoon show at HMV and the late show, the final show on Topshop, then get a train to Brighton and then do Southern and Ocean split breakfast on a Sunday. That was every week. I was 40 hours a week on air, not including travel.
I'm interested. So was that being led through passion and the want to succeed, or was it purely for the money?
No, I've never really been about the money. And that's the truth. It was definitely the passion. I was just chipping away and working, every shift that I could get. And it wasn't about the money. In fact, I never had time to spend the money, and that's the truth, because I could only go out on a Sunday night. I used to come home from Southern Breakfast, which was, as I said, split across Ocean as well. I'd go straight to bed and get up at about 5 in the afternoon. I'd go down to a local in the East End of London, have a couple of beers, Ruby Murray, and back to bed, and then get up and start all over again. It was a serious treadmill, that.
So I'm just thinking back. So you're in Northern Ireland. You train to be a chef. You move to London. Obviously, your passion is chefing. Yeah. At what point did your passion go from wanting to be a chef to wanting to be a radio presenter?
I would say around 87, 88, and then I moved to Australia. and I was cooking, mostly based in Melbourne. And I became friends with a brilliant broadcaster called Mike Hammond, who's from Sydney, but working at a station in Melbourne. And he was very, very encouraging and very, very helpful and generous with his advice. And then I managed to get myself a little gig on an indie radio station that had 5 different breakfast shows. So they had a different breakfast show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I got Thursday morning's breakfast show. And you could just go on and you cut your teeth, you made your mistakes. No one was going to criticize you. But it was a great experience. It was fun. It switched off of a night time. So I'd come in the Thursday morning, turn on the radio station, and away I'd go for 4 hours. It's amazing.
Amazing. So I'm getting completely lost in the order here. So this is before the Top Shop and before the HMV, is it?
Yeah, that was 89. And then I came back and went straight back into cooking and hospital radio. So my first gig was April 1991. That's when I did my first gig.
All right, let's move on to your first professional gig, as in a commercial radio station, Rock FM. Do you know what? It's funny, Rossi. I've been a fan of yours for many years, but if someone sat me down and said, "Right, tell me Rossi's CV," I'd probably struggle to do it, apart from the latter few stages. So, I mean, I didn't realise that Rock FM back in '92 was the first one.
Yes, that was it. Right. So remember how many shows I was doing. So I had bosses at Ocean, Top Shop, HMV, Southern FM. So I gets a phone call one Friday, just as I'm finishing my last link in Top Shop, and it was the late, great John Myers. And he went, "Team, I'd done a few shows at Rock, and he offered me a gig. I didn't take it, and he wasn't very happy. So he fell out with me for a while. But I loved the man, God rest him. And he goes, 'Team, got a gig for you.' And I goes, 'Go on then, John.' He goes, 'Evenings, Monday to Friday, 7 to 10, Saturday, 6 to 10 dance show.' I said, 'You know what? That is brilliant.' This was Friday afternoon tea time. I said, that is amazing. That is right up my street. That is one catch, team. I goes, 'Go on then. You start on Monday.' I went, 'Hang on a second. I'm based in London. My life's in London. I've got about 4 or 5 different bosses that I've got to discuss and, break the news to that I won't be able to. Team, go phone them now. I'll give you 20 minutes to phone me back. If you don't phone me back after 20 minutes, the gig's gone.' So I very hurriedly finished my show, phoned around. Everyone thankfully gave me the blessing. And I phoned John back and I said, 'John, see you about 2:00 Monday afternoon. Don't be late, team.' And away he went.
I want to talk about John Myers because a lot of people throughout all the episodes we've done have talked about the great John Myers. I'd just like to get your opinion as to why you thought he was such an incredible boss.
Well, I think John just oozed his love and passion for radio. And that came across. So for that, I respected him immensely. He was a brilliant broadcaster. He had an amazing voice on the air. And his vision, he was just the full 9 yards. He was everything. He was a programmer. He was a presenter. And again, he got jocks. He knew exactly. He also was very au fait with the commercial side as well. He was a managing director, and he was just an amazing guy, and real good fun to be with. He could be a boss, and if you stepped out of line, you knew it. You didn't cross him, but he was great fun in the night out. Really wicked sense of humor.
So, I mean, let's talk about Rock FM as well, because as much as, I know it bores many of the listeners to Crunch and Roll when I talk about my time at Viking, but that was an amazing experience for me because I was presenting in my hometown and I have a lot of love for that radio station. But equally, I think there was just as much love for Rock FM. Everybody over the other side of the Pennines was raving about rock. You had the Key, you had the City, but Rock FM was a smaller station, a bit like Viking, and it was kind of punching above its weight, wasn't it?
It certainly was. There was a lot to do with, John left after about 5-6 months, and then he went up to run a radio station in Carlisle, CFM. And then along came Jeff Graham, God rest him. Both of them sadly no longer with us. Jeff was another character, great character. And Andy Roberts was producing the Non-Stop Top 20. So he was producing that as a favor. Used to run So drive time would be 3 to 6, non-stop top 20, 6 till 7. Then I come on the evening, 7 till 10. And Jeff came along and really saw the potential with Andy Roberts. And Andy Roberts then took over the production. And we had a couple of American voiceover artists, J.J. McKay and Mitch Craig. And he really did work his magic. The station did sound hot. I mean, Capital in London in the late 80s, early 90s did lead the way for that hot rockin' radio. And we certainly, we got that sound going at Rock FM across Preston in the Northwest. At one stage, I think we had like 34% to 36% reach or something like that. It was really ridiculous. Our listening hours was massive. Breakfast and drive time were both flying. I had a really good run on Rossi's Rhythm Driven Drive.
Now, Rossi, that sounds like a show that's got a sponsored car to me.
I did have a sponsored car, yeah. And it was a car, it was a Volvo, and the car garage company's name was Minories, and down the side of it was Rossi, Rhythm Driven by Minories.
Oh, I miss them days. I miss those days.
Alan Partridge, eat your heart out.
I mean, just talk about some of the presenters that you were working with at Rock FM back in 92.
Well, when I joined to do evenings, it was Paul Jordan, who was on Breakfast. Simon Monk was his producer. They did a really good show. Dave Sander, he did the mid-morning show. And there was a guy called... it wasn't. It was Rob Charles did an afternoon show, 12:30 till 3, I think it was. And then Dara Cockram, an Irishman, he did the drive time show. Then the Non-Stop Top 20, me, Anna Simons, and for the life of me, this is really bad. I can't remember who did overnights, but we are talking 30-odd years ago here. And then after about, I'd say that was 1992, it was March 94, when they moved me on to drive time. And I had a really, really good run at drive time between 94 and 98.
Any memories from Rock FM that you'd like to share?
Slightly blurred. I mean, it was party central, and we were a lot younger then, and we were able to do that, go out late and get up and, go about our day without much of a problem. As I said to you before, a little bit earlier, anything after 10 o'clock, and it's absolutely no way, Pedro, not for me. These days, I've become a bore, actually. I've become a little bit of sensible. Sensible is probably a better word. So, yeah, there were some really, really good presenters that worked there. There was a great team upstairs as well. The sales team, the S&P, and the news team and sports team, by the way, were award-winning. Richard Frediani was working in the newsroom, and I think I can't remember whether it's ITV or BBC, but I think he's very high up in one of them anyway. And we had a sports editor and presenter called Keith Macklin, who, again, sadly no longer with us, had one of the most amazing voices, and his knowledge of football, particularly Preston North End and Blackburn Rovers, was second to none.
Is it true that there was a ghost at Rock FM? Because everybody talks about the ghost.
Yeah, well, I've often heard that there was a ghost. You do know it's an old church, and when they were basically reconstructing it to make it into the radio station, etc., there's a story. It's a little bit macabre, if you like, but basically they were digging up what would be the car park, and what they came across was a vault, and the vault was a mass grave. So it was from, God knows, hundreds of years ago. It was a mass grave. So they thought, actually, we better report this to the authorities. And, just to say, well, look, we've discovered a mass grave here, and it was a couple of 100 years old or whatever. So off they went to phone the authorities, the police, or whoever it was, and the priest to come along and check it out. But some workman had come along with a digger full of concrete and filled it all in. Yeah, so he thought, oh, well, I was supposed to fill this in, wasn't I? Yeah, that was before we discovered it. So they left it as it was. So somewhere down in that car park, there's a mass grave covered in concrete. Oh, my word.
This is turned dark, this, hasn't it, Rossi?
Cunty
We apologise, sir.
We just play records till 8, 9. When do we finish?
I'm not drunk. I've had a couple of drinks. I'm not drunk.
All right, so 6 years at Rock FM, and then you get the call to go back to London to go to Capital.
Yes. And now, Clive Dickens, who was number 2 to Parky, had phoned me and he had flirted with me quite a bit. And it got to the stage I was almost saying to myself, not even accepting his phone calls anymore. You know, I've been down to London, I've been to the old building at Euston, and then they'd moved to Leicester Square. And I get the phone call and I recognize the number straight away. And I answered, it goes, "Hi, Simon, it's Clive," in his own inimitable style. And he goes, "No, listen, I know we've chatted. This is a job offer. This is not to come down and see us. This is not to talk about a prospect of a job. We've got a job offer." I goes, "Oh, right, okay." He says, "Right, it's a Saturday night disco dance show, and then Sunday super hits after Foxy, Neil Fox finishes the jukebox. He would do the chart to the nation. Then from 7 till 8:30, he would do Foxy's jukebox across London. And then I'd come on 8:30 to midnight. So he says, pop down and see us. I've got a contract all drawn up." So then I had to speak to my bosses at Rock FM and tell them the bad news that I was moving to London. And it was an incredible time. It was just at that tail end of those glory days at 95 Point Great. I mean, you walked through Leicester Square and it was just, you just couldn't, Capital was just everywhere. That sunshine face, the old logo, you may remember it. And it was big time, really big time. So it was Chris Tarrant on breakfast. Paul Fear was doing early breakfast. Chris Tarrant, Penky was on mid-mornings. Martin Collins, brilliant broadcaster. Afternoons, Foxy and Drive. And then it was James Cannon in the evenings. And it was an amazing time and this lovely team to be part of. And we did these jocks nights out every couple of months, and everyone turned up, Tarrant included. He'd been there holding court, drinking a bottle of brandy, and he finished it, and he did his show the next morning. They were amazing nights.
I'm just thinking, Rossi, because of course, you know, we've talked about Northern Ireland, Sheffing in London.
Yeah.
I would say a majority of guests that we've had on Crunch and Roll, there's been one station that they've really wanted to be on. Was Capital the one for you, or did you have any stations like that?
Absolutely. As I mentioned a little earlier, I bombarded Richard Park with demo after demo. I think he said he could set up a stall in Camden selling blank cassettes for the amount of demos that I'd sent him over the years. Well, I would have been considered a stalker nowadays. Luckily, Richard really liked me. I was one of the very few jocks at Capital never to get the call on the XD, the private line.
Oh, really?
Never. I got one call. It was between Christmas and New Year. And we used to have to, I think we were playing off card. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, I loaded a promo and I knew this promo was kind of out of date, but it was on the log. And you know the deal, if it's on the log, you play it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I did play it, but it almost sounded generic, so it didn't sound so much out of date. XD goes, "Mr. Ross, Richard Park here, you know. I think you know why I'm calling." I said, "Richard, I know why you're calling, but that's on the log, and I wasn't not going to play it. I felt that it was." He goes, "Is it on the log for the rest of the weekend?" I said, "It is." So he says, "Go, just get a pen and go through it and scribble it off so nobody else plays it." Great show, by the way. Great show. Been listening since 7 o'clock. Carry on. And off he went. That was the closest I got to getting the old hair dryer treatment.
Do you know, it's interesting because there's such a fearful reputation of Richard Park, but I don't think there's been one guest that I've had on Crunch and Roll that's really said that they had a torrid time with him.
No, I mean, Richard was not to be messed with, and he was as fiery as you like, and maybe that's the Celtic blood in him. He was fiery. But I just knuckled down and got on with it. I always worked on my shows, and he could hear that, and he knew that I worked on my shows, and I didn't just turn up willy-nilly. And, you know, I always had some sort of prep on the go. And it was quite easy to get on in Capital because, you know, at that time we were doing 5 in a row out of the news, then into a Hall of Fame triple play, et cetera, et cetera. So the amount of speech wasn't like what I was doing at Rock FM, but you made every link count, and that's all he asked for. You made every single link count.
And what's it like broadcasting to London?
Well, I still am.
Well, of course, yeah, you are. Sorry, yeah, Rossi.
No, it was big. I remember doing my first show. It was Saturday night, and it was called The Beat Goes On with Simon Ross, and it was all retro dance, disco kind of the floor fillers kind of thing. I can remember Caroline Faraday was filling in for Margarita Taylor. Margarita used to do the show before me. And I was so nervous. I really wanted this gig. I really did want it. It was like, my ultimate dream to work at Capital. And I remember it got to about 25 to 7. I was sitting out in the office, nobody else in the building. Caroline was on air. And I actually thought to myself, I am so nervous, I could walk away from this now. I could walk.
Really?
Yes, I could walk away. I knew I wasn't going to do it, but it did cross my mind. It was like, I'm so nervous. Once I got the first link out of the way, I was okay. I was fine. But when I just got that, and the first song I played was The Beat Goes On by The Whispers. Obviously, the show was called The Beat Goes On. So out of the news into a big, staging jingle sweepery thing, and straight into The Whispers. Yes, of course, I talked it right up to the vote.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
Goes without saying, Rossi, goes without saying.
All 32 seconds, right to the beat.
And I always ask people that have been at Capital, what was it like working with Chris Tarrant? What was it like working with the real Foxy? Were they... I guess that you kind of look upon Capital and think, well, they've probably all got egos, but nobody's ever said that. They've always said it was a big family of presenters.
Yeah, listen, funny, my first night was the very, very, very first episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So now Tarrant was mega in London, and he was known from Tiz Was and other TV shows, but this put him into a different stratosphere altogether. But CT was just fun. When I did Early Breakfast, he used to come in and he'd make up a song about a link that he'd heard me doing in his chauffeur-driven car and then he would sing the song about me and the link had done at, say, 5:30.
No.
Yeah. So he was recording for the first half hour, but he'd get in, obviously, before 6. And we just to sit in the office, him and I, and we'd just chat and talk about the night before and talk about fishing, talk about whatever. He was great. And Neil Foxy Fox, absolute gentleman, really good, fun guy. Wasn't the party animal that I sort of imagined he might be. But you know what? We'd had nights out and he was always very kind with his advice. And, I was a new kid on the block kind of thing. But I never got the feeling that they were being selfish or they were being a little bit hostile towards me. They never treated me like I could be a threat. Nor could I be. But no, it was a good team. As you say, it was a real family affair.
So in 2001, you leave Capital.
Yes, I did. There was changes. So I was doing Early Breakfast and a few other bits and bobs and doing loads of daytime cover. And suddenly I was on weekend overnights. I was really downhearted about it because things have been going really good. But new bosses, new ideas, new visions. And I was moved on to, I think it was weekend overnights. And then spoke to Mike Borden. And Bordy was moving to Radio Air. They were making changes there. And then I said, I'd love a daytime show. And he goes, I think mid-mornings would really suit you. So within a couple of weeks, we chatted and we sort of batted some figures around. And then I went up to see him in Leeds and I had a little look around. And, I went back down to London and told my new boss that I'd been offered a job and I'd like to take it. And he said, okay. So off I went to Leeds for 4 glorious years. It was a really, really good time. I ended up, I was stadium announcer at Leeds United, and they were on a big roll then. They were like, really big in the Champions League. They had a phenomenal football team. And of course, Leeds Rhinos were in fire. It was a great time, really good time.
So how did that happen? Did you know Mike Borden before? Or was it just a phone? You did, okay.
Yeah, I knew Mike through a whole lot of nights out. And in fact, the first night we met, it was Paul Jordan had a house over in the Wirral, and Mike used to live in that house along with John O'Hara, who was a presenter at Radio City.
Yeah, legend. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Paul, myself, Mike Toolan, and Mike Borden, all went to Manchester to watch Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn 2 at Old Trafford. So we made a whole day of it and a whole night of it. And that's where I got to really meet Bordy, and we remain friends ever since.
So let's talk about Radio Air, because I mean it's an interesting radio station, is Radio Air, isn't it? I mean, people mock it slightly because you can't pick it up outside of the car park. You know, there's all the usual Radio Air jokes, but you were there at a good time, weren't you?
Yeah, they did make some changes. Obviously, Logie was on Breakfast, Simon Logan, and he was doing a great job. But it was changing a bit direction, maybe going that bit younger. I don't know, but they hired me, and I'm older than Logie, to do the mid-morning show. They brought in Ditchy, and he did a really good job on the breakfast show. And then Ingrid used to do the afternoon show. She came down from Newcastle. She was a lovely, fabulous, fabulous broadcaster. And again, it was a really good team of jocks, and and there was a really good atmosphere. It's not the brightest building in the world, Radio Air. It's like it's a prefab. I remember Dee Ford, who lived in Leeds, came in to me one day and said, because the studio, for some reason, had no windows. So there's no windows, so there's no natural daylight. So they got the studios refurbed, and they got them decorated in brown and grey. I mean, hello? Brown and grey in a room with no natural light. So she said, I remember saying to her one time, do you know, sometimes I come in here and this building drains my energy. Doesn't you too? And of course, her being my big boss said, no, I'm always full of positive energy. But
the Rossi charm, Rossi charm.
So we had fun in the building, but it's nothing compared to the tower where I worked now for the last 19 years.
No, well, we'll get onto that in a bit because I'm excited to chat about the tower. Yeah. So, obviously that's where you go next. Because, actually, before we get onto City, you do a little bit of work for Magic at the time whilst you're at Radio Air as well, don't you, for Magic 8 to 8?
Yeah, I'd done some shows on Magic, and I was the voice of Magic, the Magic Network, for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And then I asked for a pay rise, so they changed the voiceover artist.
Did they?
Yeah, I did. I can't even remember who. I dropped the line. I said, listen, I've been in doing lots more voices than I used to do. And, is there any chance of, are they within a week? They got a new voiceover artist. So that was that. I can't remember who it was that I dropped the email to, but they weren't very happy that I dared ask for a few more bob. And yeah, I did some shows in Magic.
Do you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I did some work on Magic 1161. And I was known as Mickey Magic on air. It was such a strange experience doing a show on FM, as at the time it was EMAP, where we were encouraged to drink and talk about partying, to then go on to Magic 1161. It's just a completely different world, isn't it? Going from one thing to another.
Yeah, I mean, as you just mentioned there, I mean, we were, actually encouraged to turn up hungover and talk about our, shenanigans from the night before. And now it's a totally different business, a lot more professional. But, we had a laugh and we relayed our experiences on air. And that's what it was all about, talking about being out and having a good time and, going to see such and such a band or going to a party and getting home 20 minutes before your alarm went off and stuff like that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Back in those EMAP days, it was very much it was the party culture, wasn't it?
Let's talk about the EMAP Awards.
Oh,
Rossi,
my
you must
Gideon.
I mean, if I were to list the top 10 things that I miss about radio, EMAP Awards would be up at the top.
I remember one in Sheffield, and God almighty, we all ended up back in Noddy Holder's room, okay? Because Noddy was doing shows on Magic Manchester. He was doing bits and bobs, right? So there was myself, Noddy, Dave Shearer, Big Dave.
Yeah.
Rick Horton, the late Pete Mitchell, and a few others. And Noddy just kept ordering drinks and putting them in his room. He was very, we all offered to chip in some money and he wouldn't have it. And we carried on drinking, talking absolute shenanigans, nonsense all night. And I remember we all went down for breakfast. We hadn't been to bed. At one point, this is a real weird thing. So we're all having the banter, the crack, the beers were flowing. All we're drinking were beers. All night, bottles of beers. And we're drinking away. And at one point, Rick Horton vanishes. So remember, we're in Noddy Holder's room, not in Rick's room. So the next thing, he comes out of the bathroom with the towel wrapped around him, just as random as you like, gets up, takes himself off and has a shower in Noddy's room. Uses his deodorant and everything. And then walks back in with a towel wrapped around his waist and starts drinking beer again. It was crazy. It was crazy.
I've got to say, Rossi, you, Rick, Dave Shearer. I mean, that's not a recipe for anything good, is it? It really isn't.
It's we did have some amazing nights, and I would like to say some brilliant memories, but sadly, the memories are very blurred, are totally blank, to be perfectly honest. But that was such a random night. I remember going to breakfast that next morning, and as I said, and the waiter came over and said, "You used to be the bloke that was in Slade," or something like that. Whatever he said to Noddy, it just didn't make any sense. And he said, "Well, I'm still the same bloke, as polite as you like." But the guy was just a little bit like starstruck and taken aback, and he was very young. So he probably wouldn't have remembered Slade from 1973 when they were number one at Christmas. But I can remember going back to my room to pick up my belongings and check out, and Dee Ford was checking out. And she looked at me and she goes, "Did you have a good night last night, Rossi?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, and she just looks and gets her face a bit closer to mine and goes, "You've not been to bed yet, have you?" And actually, no, Day, I haven't, but I'll sleep all day today.
We're having a party. Oh, yeah.
All right, let's move on to Radio City in 2005, because what a radio station Radio City was.
Well, it certainly was. When I started at Radio City, Kev Seed was on breakfast. He did an amazing job. He had outstanding figures. And, Seedy had a massive following. Everyone woke up to Kev Seed at breakfast. And then I did the mid-morning show, 10 till 1, which was, I really enjoyed that show. Kicked off at the top 10 at 10. At 12:30, I did a feature called Desperate Scousewives.
Yes!
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And that's got a lot of interest and generated a good listenership.
Yeah, Rossi, talk about Desperate Scousewives, because that was great.
It was basically it was a cross between like a scammer call and a confession, if you know what I mean. And basically, it was people's stories about their relationships that hadn't gone particularly well, and that really was what I became famous for. That and Is Right, Rossi La. Because even, funny, last Saturday, I was going out for dinner and there was 4 guys walked past me and they all shouted at the same time, "Is Right, amazing. Rossi La." And, we've not used that expression for a long time. But, Desperate Scousewives, it was just that sort of stop-down moment, water cooler moment, whatever you like. So it was a different story every day, different scenario. Sometimes, I would do the call on behalf of somebody to their ex-partner. And obviously it was pre-recorded because there was a lot of choice and tasty language use. So that was Desperate Scousewives in a nutshell, I think.
There was such love for Radio City when you joined. I mean, why? Is it because Liverpool's such a unique city, do you think?
Yeah, Liverpool do love local. They do love local. The home of 2 cathedrals, 2 great football teams. And City was very much part of the fabric since it launched in 1974. It's coming up to the 50th anniversary in October. And obviously there was, it's a great city, but it's also had its tragedies. And, we all know what happened in 1989. And Radio City was the go-to radio station at that time. And it's been part of, people have grown up with me on Radio City. And they're young adults now. It's God, I used to listen to you going to primary school doing your quiz called The Village Idiot. And I'd go, oh, wow. We had to move that because kids and parents were sitting in the car listening to it and getting into class late. So I had to move it from 7:45 to 8:15. Because I kid you not, Parents were letting their children sit in the car to listen to The Village Idiot. That was the only quiz where the loser stays on. Here, you talk about kids listening and then they've grown up. Here is the stages of radio. You will relate to this, right? I was at Rock FM in my 20s, young thing, on the evening show, doing loads of clubs in and around Blackpool, Blackburn, Wigan, Widnes, doing all that. So these are the stages that I've gone through in radio. So I would get the 20-something girl coming up to me and says, "Oh, my friend really likes you." Okay? And then in a few blinks of an eye, you'd get someone of a similar age coming up to you and saying, "Do you know what?" And I go, "What is it?" "My mum really likes you." Right? We were in a restaurant in Liverpool called San Carlo about a year ago. And this young lady came over. There's a group of them all going out. They're all dressed up to the nines. And they're all very glam. And this young one comes over to me and says, "Are you Rossi?" And I said, "I am." Said, "Could I have a selfie?" So I looked at my wife and I went, "Yeah, of course you can. Of course. I'll never say no. Can never say, because I'm going to send it to my nan. My nan really loves you." And I'm like, "Oh my God." My wife spat her gin and tonic. I kid you not. So it went from, that age group liking me to "My mum really likes you." Now my nan loves you.
Well, let's hope you can make it to the next stage, Rossi.
My great nan loves you. Oh, dear.
Let's talk about the tower, because it is the most iconic radio station building on the planet. What was it like working at the top of the tower?
Do you know something? As I said, 19 years in April, I've been working in that tower. And not one day have I ever taken that view for granted. And it looks great in fog, in rain, in snow, in blue skies, summer sunrise. It always looks fantastic. And when I take people up there, I get that vibe and that buzz off them that they're so blown away with the views. It is absolutely breathtaking. It's just fabulous. I walk to work every morning. I haven't owned a car for about 3 years. So
really?
So I walk to work and I walk back just to get the old steps in. Do you know what I mean? So by 11 o'clock in the morning, I've done 3.5 miles. So, on a daily basis, Monday to Friday. But it's, I always feel proud wherever I'm in the city and I look up and I see the tower, standing there in all its glory.
Is it true when the lift doesn't work, it's an absolute nightmare though?
Jesus H. Christ. I've done it a few times. It's really tiny steps as well. So you're taking tiny steps and it goes on forever and ever. And it tells you what level you're at when you're walking up those concrete stairs. I mean, I've got there at 5 o'clock to be told the lifts are broken and I had to use the stairs. And I've showered and cleaned and my quiff's been quiffed and gelled. And by the time I get up to the top, I look like I've run a marathon. I'm sweaty, my hair's flopping. It really is a pain in the butt. I don't mind going down, but going up is a real nightmare.
And let's just go back to some of the people you were working with. You've mentioned Rick, you've mentioned Kev. I mean, all of them were well-renowned party animals. We've had Rick on Crunch and Roll. It was a fantastic episode.
Yeah.
What was it like working with those guys?
Yeah, it was a good time. Again, that was 2005. And see, my daughter was born in 2006, so that kind of calmed me down a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. But, it was a really good time. Again, you had Magic just down the studio, just down the corridor, and working with the late Phil Easton was also an absolute pleasure. He was the announcer. He was the pitch side announcer at Anfield, and I was, of course, at Goodison for 10 seasons over for Everton. Yeah. And we used to have some really, really good banter. I really, really missed Phil, when he went far, far too soon. In fact, he moved to City Talk, and City Talk was 6 till 9 breakfast, by which time I'd moved on to Radio City Breakfast, which was 6 till 10. So every morning I would see him and say, "Only a swine would leave at 9. Real men stay till 10. And that was the last thing I ever said to him. I remember a Monday morning, he waited for me in the car park, and we walked round together. Liverpool had played on the Sunday, and he'd been working at Anfield. and they were behind, and then they came from behind to beat Chelsea. So we're chatting about that. And then that morning when I finished my breakfast show, he was sitting in the office, and I said that to him. Only a swine would leave at 9. Real men stay till 10. And he goes, "Go on, change the record, Mr. Rossi." We both laughed, parted company. And that was the last I ever seen of him, which was really sad.
No.
An
Blimey.
amazing broadcaster, an amazing human being, a very, very good man. And as I said, sorely missed at the Tower. Sorely missed across Liverpool, you know.
There was one guy that I remember, because I was at EMAP at the same time that you were at Radio City. A guy called Joe Ferguson. Do you remember him?
Joe Joe was a loose cannon. He was from Belfast.
Was he? Yeah. Do you know, very rarely does anybody ever talk about him. Didn't he join Radio City and then bring in a homeless guy to sing karaoke for his first show?
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that would not surprise me. He was the loose cannon of all loose cannons. And I'll tell you a great story about. I mean, I've been out with Joe a few times. I'd come over to Liverpool from Leeds, and I'd been in his company's serious case. But one time, Richard Maddock hauled him in and said, "Your links are too long, and it's about 15 things per link. I need you just to trim it down a little bit. Your content's great, but you know what it's like." And he gave him a bit of a telling down the banks about, you know, tighten up a little bit, and you can't be going on and doing 7-8 minute links, da. So he turned up the next day. He was on 10 till 1, yeah? He segued every single song and didn't say a word. Didn't say a word out of the news, didn't say a weather check, a time check. He didn't cross-promote what was coming up later in the day or what had gone before him. He segged every single song. Richard Maddock was over in Manchester, had come back, went through Powerlog because he got the gist of it, and actually went to Joe's house apparently that night and read him the riot act.
Oh, I love that. We need to track him down. We need to get him on.
I think he would. I tell you what, he would make a brilliant Crunch and Roll guest. He really, really would. But you know, finger on the old bleeper button, etc., etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to talk about Everton as well, because of course you did 10 seasons at Goodison Park. I mean, you were very well known in Liverpool. Did you get a chant about you at all?
No, I didn't get a chant about me. I obviously walking down to Goodison Park. It was just from I left the car parked right down to where I went in via reception. It was, "Is right, Rossi La. Is right, Rossi La." Kids all shouting it. I didn't get a chant, but this did happen. Now, I would always write the away team, particularly foreign names, phonetically. Okay, so obviously it was well au fait with Everton squad and all the names, but I would write them all phonetically and in print, and it was all clear in front of me. And when I would do the away team, I would sort of go through the away team fairly quickish, not too fast. But then I would do Everton really, you know, it would be a gap between each player so you could get the cheer. So my boss at Everton, Mark, said, "You know what? You need to give the away team just a bit more time. The fans are onto it. Just not like what you do for us." I said, okay. And it was Aston Villa. We're up playing in the Premier League. And I got down to their number 12. And I looked down at my sheet and I looked up at the screen waiting for his picture. And the gust of wind came and took my sheet away. So it was thrown a little bit. And it was number 12 and it was Gabriel. And I couldn't get the surname out. I was going, it was Agbonlahor, Gabriel Agbonlahor, number 12. But it wasn't that I couldn't read it. I knew it off by heart. It wouldn't come out. And it was Aglapong, Boglet. So Phil Neville was coming back off injury. He was on the bench that day. And he ripped me. What did you say his name was? He was given, and I'm thinking, right, I'm getting to the end of Villa. I need Phil to stop before I go into Everton's team news, because I really do like to give it the Michael Buffer treatment. You know what I mean? The real boom. I thankfully stopped. However, a year later, I'd only started using Twitter. Villa were coming back to Everton. So started getting messages from all the Everton fans. How are you going to cope with Gabby Agbonlahor's name tomorrow, right? So Saturday afternoon comes, doing the team news. I was getting bombarded, really bombarded. So doing the team news, and it gets to number 11, and then I pause. And then it goes, Villa's number 12, Gabriel Agbonlahor. And all the Everton fans cheered. So he was, and then I did 2 sets of team news. I did it again, and they all cheered again. And he was looking around thinking, why are they cheering for me? That's the Everton fans cheering me. Am I coming in a free transfer or something to Everton from Aston Villa? But every bloody I still get it. Oh, what about Gabriel Agbonlahor?
I love that. I love it. So, you're at Radio City, you do mids, and then you move on to do breakfast, and you do 10 years of Radio City breakfast. That must have been incredible.
Yeah, It was a big move. I didn't want the gig. That's the truth. I didn't want it, but they were hell bent on making changes. Okay, and I got it, and it was huge shoes to fill. Really, really big shoes to fill. And yeah, the figures did take a bit of a knock because people don't really like change, and especially that time of the day. You know what it's like, breakfast radio. But it came around, and within a year or so, we're more or less bang up there again. And it trucked along, and I'd built up a really good rapport with the audience, and we had fun, and we had a laugh, and certainly a lot more risque than what I do now, obviously. But it was a different time, different era. And then there was changes made, and I was back on mid-mornings again for a while. And it was funny. There was a time Radar had one of those, in a certain area, every single radio station takes a big mega drop. And it's just the way Radar falls sometimes. So the BBC's had dropped, BBC National, BBC Merseyside, Juice, all of them had taken a big hit. Breakfast radio in particular. I'd just come off a good survey, but I managed to hold my audience, okay? So that in itself, I would say, was an achievement when the bottom's fallen out of the market to hold on. Anyway, so a couple of new bosses came along and decided I was going to go back in mid-mornings. They need to freshen up breakfast. So I wasn't best pleased. I'm not going to lie and say I was delighted. I wasn't best pleased. So a little while after that, Mike Cass, who I love dearly, and we're in touch on a regular basis, and he came up to see me last summer. He said, I've got this idea. We've got City Talk on FM, and then we've got Magic, or whatever the brand was, on AM. What I'm thinking is switching Magic and calling it Radio City 2 onto the FM frequency and putting City Talk onto AM. If we did that, would you consider doing breakfast? And I went, what, playing all the big songs from the 70s, 80s, 90s? I went, absolutely, Mike, if that came about. He said, we're going to go and speak to Ofcom and do all the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's. So I'd been in holidays with my wife and my daughter, and it was Friday morning, we're getting ready to come back. Phone rings, was Mike Cass. And he goes, Rossi, I know you're on holidays. I says, Mike, you can call me anytime. You're my boss. We're also friends. You can call me anytime. He says, Ofcom have agreed it. I'm going to ask you again, would you be happy to do breakfast? And I said, absolutely. That was in the October. And by December, I was on Radio City 2 breakfast, which was for Liverpool in the Northwest. And then Andy Crane did a network breakfast. And then there was a local drive time with Rick. It was, and I think it was Darren Proctor did mid-mornings, and he was fabulous on that. So that was the beginning of it. Here's a funny thing. I'm a technophobe. When we started this conversation,
yes, I do, yeah. Amen.
I had trouble hooking up with you. Anyway, this is a funny thing. The studio where I now work, they put me in that studio. I was still on Radio City doing mids. He says, go down there, get yourself familiar with that studio. It's a little bit slightly different to what you're used to. But he said, you can't do anything. The studio's not on air. You cannot do anything. Do whatever you want. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Of course I did. Guess what I managed to do? I took Manchester and Newcastle off air. Yep. Manchester and Newcastle all off air. Deleted all the music.
You're joking?
Yeah, I don't even know how I did it. The engineer says, what you've done is impossible, but only you managed to do it. I took them both off air, Manchester and Newcastle.
That is incredible, Rossi.
I was a popular boy that day.
All right, so let's move on to where you are now.
Yeah.
So in 2019, of course, you take over Greatest Hits Radio Breakfast.
Yeah.
Which is where you are today. How did it feel going from Radio City to Greatest Hits?
So Radio City 2 is the same studio that I was working in when it changed to Greatest Hits. Now, I could always talk about the view outside the window, but I couldn't mention the things that I could mention when I was doing Radio City 2, like the views from the tower, like the traffic coming down Scotty Road, like my walker drive-in to work used to drive in then. I couldn't mention those local sites because it would mean anything to someone in Manchester, Newcastle, London, etc., etc. And I mentioned a little bit earlier in our chat about how nervous I was on my first night in Capital. I think the closest I'd ever been to that kind of nerve level was when we switched to Greatest Hits Radio and I knew it was national. And coming out of the news at a couple of minutes past 6 that morning and firing into David Bowie's Let's Dance. I actually had rehearsed my first link. I really had rehearsed my first link because I just wanted it to be perfect, but I didn't want it to sound too structured and too rehearsed. So once I got that link out of the way, I was fine.
You've obviously got the talent. You've obviously got the voice. Because you sent me a voice note this morning. I played it in my office, and a lot of the women and some of the men were like, "Who's that? What an amazing, sexy voice!" So you've got the voice, Rossi. You've got the charm. Do you still get nervous, and do you still enjoy doing radio?
Yeah, I get a buzz. I really do get a buzz every morning, and some breakfast show hosts like to warm up, and use that 6 o'clock hour. I don't. As soon as 6 comes, I am there. I'm on it. And I get up at about 10 past 4. I leave the house shortly before 5, 15-minute walk. So by the time 6 o'clock comes, I've more or less been up for 2 hours and I've walked in the fresh air, for 20 minutes, say. So, and I've had 2 coffees down me. So I am good to go at 6, really good to go. I get really tired at 2 in the afternoon. I always have a little siesta, but I think most breakfast show jocks do, So nervous, probably no, but I get the buzz. I do get the buzz, and that vibe. Here we go. We are live, and we're across the UK, and obviously, there's a lot of people tune in. The last figures were best ever, and I try not to think about that too much because that's the sort of thing that would make me nervous.
Yeah. I've got a question for you. As a young lad in Northern Ireland, moving across to London to enhance your chefing career, and then you get, bitten by the radio bug. Did you ever dream of being a national breakfast presenter?
No, I didn't actually. It's weird how it all came around doing this show. They could have gone for anybody. To do the breakfast show, and they stuck with me. And you know what? I'll always be honest. If I've nothing good to say, I'd probably not say anything. But I'll always be honest, and if I've got something good, I'll say it. I've got a couple of bosses, Andy Ashton and David Salty, and they are so helpful. They get me. I think I've only ever had 3 proper telling offs in 5 years of breakfast with Andy. And you know what? As soon as he said what he says, and he's had to tell you what he's had to tell you, you know what? That's it. He says, move on now. I've said my bit to you. Forget about it. Don't think about it again today. And he's really, really great. So I do have really good advice and direction from above. Salty, one of the most laid-back characters I've ever met, but he never, ever misses a thing. He doesn't miss a single thing. He's on the ball and, never be fooled by his kind of laid-back kind of attitude, if you like, as he never misses a beat. He's brilliant.
I did work with Salty. When I was at BRMB, I worked with Salty for many years. Yeah, so I'm fully aware of his relaxed attitude. And, sometimes you just think he's just not interested, but he is listening.
Crikey, he is, yeah. So I've a lot to be thankful for in that respect. And we have a daily meeting with producer Al Toll. Producer Al proves that age is but a number. He's 27. The guy is talented beyond talent. Talent is far too small a word for him. I'm not just saying that because he's my producer. This guy's a whiz kid. This guy is just on it like a car bonnet. So Andy Ashton, Al, and myself have a catch up every morning, and it's always so positive. And if anything, if Andy will say, "Look, I've made 2 notes this morning," and it'll say, "Blah blah blah blah. Why did you do that?" I said, "Did that for this reason or whatever." Okay, and it's a good working relationship that we all have.
I just wondered as well, did you have much relationship with the other presenters? I mean, of course, the Ken Bruce move was probably the most genius move in British radio. I don't think anyone can deny that, can they? But do you have much to do with those guys?
Well, that was announced on my birthday last year. And Andy Ashton phoned me and says, "There's your birthday present, Rossi dude. Ken Bruce is coming. And he said to me on the birthday the other week, on the 17th of January, "I'm going to keep reminding you, this is your birthday present. Every year, I'm going to say, Ken Bruce is your birthday present. You're getting the same present every year." Well, obviously we did a little reception party, a little greeting party for Ken. And Ken, I didn't expect him to know me, but he did. And he came straight over, "Hey, Rossi," he says, "Well, since I discussed with my wife that I was moving to Greatest Hits, she's tuned into your breakfast show. And she hasn't moved since. She just listens to you at breakfast." And I was really blown away with that. And, I was really pleased. Obviously, Mark Goodyear, I've met Mark on a few occasions. We talk on private message sometimes, and the same with Simon Mayo. But I'm the only one that comes out of Liverpool. Sometimes a message can, but not too regular. It would be nice to maybe go down and do a show from London a couple of times a year. I think that's on the cards, I think.
Well, Rossi, thank you so much for being on Crunch and Roll. It's been, it's just nice seeing your face. I can't believe you're 57, by the way. You still look about 32. You look incredible. That walk to the studio is doing you the world of good, my friend.
Fresh air, oil of Ulay, lovely jubbly. There you go.
But thank you so much. Thank you for being on.
Do you know, I've really, really enjoyed listening to the Crunch and Roll podcast, and I was absolutely delighted to be asked. And I love listening. And I love the teases that you tweet out.
That's Simon.
Simon, they're great teases, and you can tell you worked in radio, because those little teases, they hook you right across and just want you to listen to, make you want to listen to the podcast, which is always brilliant.
It's interesting you talk about your producer at Greatest Hits, but equally Simon is one of the greatest producers on the planet. So I'm very, very fortunate to have him on this podcast with me. But Rossi, thank you so much. It's lovely seeing your face again. I ask people, who would you like to hear with their own episode of Crunch and Roll?
Do you know what? I would have to say Chris Tarrant. Chris Tarrant has loads and loads of great stories to tell, including the time when we were doing Party in the Park, and they closed the bar when we were all on stage for the final encore. And Suggsy had hidden loads of booze. And I told Chris Tarrant that the bar was shut, but I knew where Suggsy's booze was hid. So we run down and nicked it. And then Suggsy came and he was fuming because his booze had gone. So we started sharing the stolen booze that we nicked of him with Suggsy. And he was made up and delighted and was ever so thankful that we were sharing our booze with him, which was his booze in the first place. I kid you not. I've got a great picture somewhere of myself, Suggs and Tarrant, and we're all doing cheers with our bottles of booze that we nicked from Suggsy's secret stash.
I love that. Great story.
So yeah, Chris Tarrant would be brilliant on the Crunch and Roll podcast.
We'll put him on the list. Rossi, thank you so much. You've done voiceover work. We all know that. Would you be so kind, in your incredible voice that you have, please take us away with the end credits?
Well, you've been listening to Crunch and Roll with me, Rossi. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app and get every new episode as soon as it drops. Crunch and Roll is a 969 media production presented by John Fox and fabulously produced by Simon Bujowski.
You got it!
Oh, yeah.
We have a winner!